Welcome to Musicians versus the World, the podcast where we explore aspects of music and musician life that may not have been covered in music school. I am your host, Christine Smith. My guest today is composer Kyle Rodriguez. He's here to share his thoughts on building a career as a composer in the film industry through a non-traditional path. Kyle Rodriguez is a film composer, producer, and songwriter based in Los Angeles. Using a unique collection of bespoke instruments, toys, and tape machines, Kyle writes music that combines the orchestra with modern production and analog circuits. His work can be heard on projects across networks including Apple TV+, Netflix, Hulu, Nickelodeon, and Adult Swim. Most recently, Kyle scored Apple TV+'s Jane, a live-action CGI animation blended adventure series inspired by the works of Dr. Jane Goodall. He also worked on Paramount+'s highly anticipated docuseries, The Family Stallone, which will give audiences a rare glimpse into the off-camera life of action movie star Sylvester Stallone. As a composer and a child of Latino immigrants, Kyle is dedicated to removing the barriers to entry for other people of color pursuing composition and strives to create opportunities for young musicians hoping to enter the film industry. He currently resides in Northeast Los Angeles, where he continues to DJ and produce artists when he's not on a deadline. So Kyle, thank you so much for being here, and welcome
my goodness.
to Musicians
Thank you.
versus
God,
the World.
Bios are so embarrassing. That's it's so earnest and that's very funny. But thank you so much for having me. It's so good to meet you.
It's great to meet you. I'm so excited to talk with you about all these things. I'm so interested in the way that you compose music. You've got such a diverse background with the DJ and toys and tape machines. You want to talk a little bit about how you use those sort of things to create your music?
Yeah, well, I was always kind of like a tech geek. Like I for years I thought I wanted to be an editor or a colorist, and it was kind of a thing where I was a musician on the side, kind of like exploring my own weird interests and taking things apart, and I was always kind of tinkering is what my agent likes to pitch me as, a tinkerer, which, I feel like it makes me look like a cobbler, and just, like an elf that makes shoes. But I don't know. I was always just like interested in trying to do things the hardest way possible. I think there's much easier ways to get ideas across with like plugins and things like that. You know what I mean? Right. There's all sorts of techie ways to get around what I do, but I don't know. I've got this I don't know if you could see it. Okay, yeah, that's it right here. It's like a record factory. So basically it makes so you can plug in your own source and then make a little vinyl record that sounds real bad. It's
really?
Yeah, but it's pretty amazing. Like you just like it has like a headphone jack essentially, and then you plug in you would put a blank vinyl disc onto it, and then it cuts it as it like goes around. So like something like that, I was like, well, that's cool. Like I have to make up some excuse to use that. So like I'll make it infinitely hard for myself. And I think for the Family Stallone, it was the kind of thing where we were making a lot of beats, and it was a lot of we were looking for texture, but also to have it sound modern and not so out of place in that kind of show. So I was looking for unique ways to put things together, and I wrote a song as if I was like a 60s, like a Motown kind of energy, and then recorded it onto that, and then sampled that back into my thing as if I was sampling a record, and then used it as if it was a sample, but that way I didn't have to pay anybody.
Oh my goodness.
I didn't have to do clearance.
So it is much easier. That's so awesome that you were able to do that. So you were able to take that and tinker with it and then use it to make something actually sound modern.
Yeah. It's just, again, like there are much easier ways to do these things.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure
if you
there's
if you got some time to do it, and I don't, but
I'm sure there's a plugin somewhere that could do that. But I think that there's
time.
Something really organic about doing it yourself, though.
Yeah, it's just fun, and it sounds like something else for sure. Like it really. Because at some point when you're doing things yourself like that, And I didn't go to school for music, so it's the kind of thing where, especially when I was starting out, and I think I've learned more of the rules, but I was picking things up and figuring out how to do it in my own little twisted way.
Yeah.
Like I was getting to the finish line, but you know, if any producer, you know, looked over my shoulder, they'd be like, well, that's a crazy way to make drums. Like you don't need to do that. That took forever, man. And they'd be right. But I think inherently in the process of doing things wrong and just doing things kind of the way that you learned it, it ends up kind of being its own thing. Like it has its own, you know, character.
Yeah. Well, I think if you go to school and you get the background, you learn a lot of the theory and you learn a lot of the shortcuts.
Mm-hmm.
But then once you finish school, you end up doing a lot of experimentation, just like you're doing anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, listen, I think the shortcuts are there for a reason. The shortcuts are there is because, you know, cavemen with their microphones, you know, worked for generations to figure out the best way to record a drum set. So like I respect like the technique, right. Especially when it comes to engineering and things like that. But I think like with producing, it gets, I don't know. There's young producers are always looking for like, how do you do this the exact way that like this producer did it? And
right.
and I think what's hard is that it is up to interpretation. It is, you know, you do it your own way and you figure it out, and whatever gets you there, whatever finishes the song is the way that it's done, and it doesn't really matter beyond that.
Right. And we talk to a lot of musicians, and it doesn't matter if they're composers or performers or anything.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about finding your own voice. And if that's the way you find your own voice, by your method, then I think that's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
So is that a tape machine behind you?
Yeah, it's oh my God, my I had an ex who wanted to murder me. So we
okay, that's a story.
So it's a TIAC A3340S. It's like from the I think it's from the early 70s. It's like a hi-fi kind of like a prosumer. It's reel to reel. And I picked that up in San Bernardino from an estate sale from like clearly kind of like a hobbyist musician who had sadly passed away. And we're going up to see her parents and to like go on this kind of family trip. And I'd been like, I'm a big gearhead. And on the way up to the bay, I saw that this estate sale was happening and they were like practically like giving this thing away. And I'd been like looking for this for like years and years, like something like this that was a good deal. And I was like, can we please stop? Like, I promise, like, it's good. Like, I'll wear a shoot. And she was not happy because she was like, I can't believe you're making me stop. That's not why we broke up. Good for her. She's doing lovely. It's all amicable and fine. But like every little thing in here has like some sort of story. But not all of them are connected to exes, which rocks.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I think so.
So now, have you actually used that machine in any of your scores?
Oh yeah, it sounds so good. It's
yeah.
Yeah, it's honestly, like I'm using it a lot for drums. Like I almost use it as a piece of outboard where I'll like have maybe some drums that I like, some sound design stuff going on in the computer. I'll send it out of the computer into the tape machine and then back in, not necessarily recording onto the tape, because then, you know, if you know anything about tape, it moves everything, and then suddenly you're spending so much time worrying about timing and getting it to sit right where it was. But instead I'm kind of using these like the preamps and the circuits on board to give it a little bit of like, you know, a little bit of funk.
Gotcha. So you're an analog type of guy then.
Analog boy. Not always. No, I've kind of gone full circle where I was like a big gearhead, and now I don't know, I think every producer, every musician goes through the cycle of like, oh, gear is it, gear isn't it, no, gear is it. And I think like whatever works. Like I'm using plugins. I'm using like it like the gear is fun, and it's pretty, and it like looks good on Zoom, which is something, which is real, which is a real thing. If you show up to a meeting, big tape machine, people are like, oh, wow, this guy's legit. And yeah, I've got like the gear ends up not being totally important. I gotta say, plugins are pretty good.
Yeah. Now, I will say that there are some of my listeners that are more on the performance side, so they don't know the difference between digital and analog.
Totally fine.
Do you want to explain a little bit about what it is we're talking about? So that
Yeah. So like, I don't know, there's all this overpriced expensive gear that, that is also like wildly inefficient and will up your electricity bill a lot. I think there's two sides of it. There's like the creative side of like if you're a producer, anything that gets you across the line is okay. But I think there are also like principles in engineering and things like that again exist for a reason. So like digital being the plugins in your computer, not having to buy an audio interface, like being able to just like produce and do things completely digital, and it can sound very, very close. And I think there are lots of purists in the world who swear by analog gear and think but I think it doesn't really matter so much. Oh, and analog gear being, the physical keyboards, the analog synths, things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big machines.
The big, heavy, expensive things that are always broken when you buy them. And so you have to spend a lot of money to get them fixed. And even then they're going to break again. Doesn't matter. It's no matter what you do.
Well, they're machines, so.
They're machines. That's right.
They need upkeep just like anything, like an instrument.
They need love. They need love.
They do. Okay, so I love the way that you're looking at this and the way that you compose and produce. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Jane, that cute children's show, is absolutely adorable and completely different from the Family Stallone. So what was your composing? I mean, that's just adventure. And it's different, like different places, different locations. Tell me about your approach to that, because I would assume it's different.
Yeah, no, it's very different. So Stallone's being like very beat driven, very it's like drums and guitars and things like that. Jane's pretty orchestral, and the process ends up for that being a lot more straightforward. Like I think at first I worked for the demo to get the job like 3 weeks on like 8 minutes or something like that, because I was really trying to find what this thing was going to sound like. I had no idea. I was just like, okay, like maybe it's orchestral, like maybe they don't. And a lot of the time when you're starting on jobs, they're always like, we don't want orchestral. Like we want to do something kind of different. And then, little by little, gradually, it's like, well, nothing quite hits the same.
Go back to orchestral.
Exactly. So the show is very orchestral. I try like on every episode, I try to use some instrument from the world of that animal. So for the panda, I've got this enormous, the very tail of it right over here. It's an instrument called a guzheng. It's like 8 feet long. It's enormous. It's a Chinese zither. I think like Kung Fu Panda. Like that's that. Like if you wanted to think of the sound. And like I try to just like be kind of like respectful to the regions where these like animals live, and I think it just like gives each episode a little flavor and really places us in that perspective. So
can you play that?
Yeah, I can.
You learned how to play it?
I learned how to play it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a big. Oh man, I would get up and drag it over if it wasn't. Like,
wait, just for one episode, you just practiced and learned how to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing where however you get, like if like a player would come in here and watch me play this thing, and they would be like, they would laugh hard. But I've just figured out a way to. I think it sounds amazing, and I've gotten pretty good at it. And like there are principles from other instruments. Like once you learn like a couple things, like if you learn one wind instrument, then boy, are you gonna have a much easier time learning all the other. Like I think, in my opinion, as someone who plays wind instruments poorly, but with the kind of thing with the guzheng, I can understand the principles of it a lot easier because I play the guitar, and there's almost nothing similar between the two besides the fact that you have to pick. But a lot of the time, the picking technique is kind of the hardest thing. I just don't worry so much about how I'm supposed to be playing this. There's a cello here. I don't know how to play the cello, but I play it on my scores, and it sounds really good. And I figured out my way to get my little thing out of it. And that was a thing for my old boss. This guy named Nathan Barr, who I worked for a bunch of years, and he is famous for having this large musical instrument collection. So Like I'm taking after him in a way, but with my own little spin on it. And but he plays a ton of stuff and would just play on all of his scores, and it really gave it, like, you could hear him in the music, and that's I think what I try to do as well. And just with everything, and it, like, there's so much that like the screen is cut off, and it's like it's a disaster.
I can see there's just this like just a room full of these different instruments.
Yeah.
Now, so you're doing this, and you said you do about 20 minutes in a week. Is that composing and practicing and recording?
Yeah.
All in 1 week.
Yeah. It'll be a lot of. It'll be like mostly composing and like the kind of thing where, so every episode starts with a big kind of action adventure sequence, and that's where, like, okay, this is whatever instrument for the episode. It doesn't have to be everywhere, but it does have to be here. And then, you know, moments where they're just in everyday life, then it's less important that, you know, you're localized to India, you know, for the tiger. And so I'll spend like the first few days just on this big sequence and just like playing things in and trying things out and trying to find sounds. And then once that's in place, it's a lot easier, and I'll just write, really just kind of write orchestrally, play guitar and things when I can. So I try to keep it as live as I can. I'll hire I think at the end of the season, I'll like hire a soloist to come in and help play on top of like a violinist, a cellist, whatever makes more sense.
I'm just wondering, because you said you didn't go to school for this. Orchestral writing, I could see being more difficult if you don't have some classical training. How'd you learn all of that?
Oh my God, I'll tell you. And if anybody's listening and is scared about learning how to write orchestrally, this is the secret. And this is told to me by this guy named Bill Ross, who is in one of the best living, like one of the greatest living composers on the planet, I think. No, I think I almost think it's objective. Look him up. Bill Ross. He is a famous orchestrator and an incredible man, and works with like Liza Minnelli and John Williams, and is truly like best of the best. And I remember back when I was an assistant, I was all insecure about my writing and was was having a really hard time. Like, I was trying to learn, but like truthfully, when I got my job as a composer's assistant, I didn't know I didn't know how to read music. Like I didn't know, I barely knew the notes on the piano. But I wanted to learn real bad, and I really cared about it. And I think that it was a big chip on my shoulder I had for a long time, not being classically trained. And I was in this seminar with Bill Ross, and he was just giving it at the studio that I was working at. Like, I was not in the seminar. Like, I was like essentially working the projector. Truly.
That's a great thing to be doing.
Essentially like running the board. And he was giving kind of like a little composing master class to this conducting seminar. And one of the things that he said, and it changed my life, is that like, okay, he was like, all you guys have to study. And these are people that I was like, everyone in this room, I was like, wow, you guys are so good. I was like, how am I ever gonna? And he was like, here's how you do it. He was like, I looked at the USC, and no offense to and USC's great. Hell yeah. Like, that's awesome.
Of course.
But he was like, I looked at the master's degree requirements for USC, and I laughed, because that's like, you should be doing that like in a week. It was like write a 5-minute piece. It was like, that's 2 days of work, like barely. And he was like, all right, so all of you need to learn. All of you can get this education on your own. All of you don't need to pay $80,000 to go to these schools, even though, again, networks that you get there, very important. That all own. Open a score. Open something that you love. Don't open Beethoven. You'll be don't open Beethoven for the love of God. Like, you have no emotional connection to Beethoven. It probably means nothing to you. And this is just like the everyday, someone who is, they like dance music and they're kind of interested in the orchestra. Find something that you love. Find the physical score to it, and you can find it online if you look hard enough, and you might have to spend $50 for a book. And find not only the score that you love and the music that you care about, but find the exact moment in that piece of music where you have some sort of reaction that find some sort of moment that matters to you, a way that a chord is moving, a way that like these instruments are fitting together. And he's like, what you do is you look at that exact moment and you just rip it apart. You absolutely destroy just those and it could be a bar, 2 seconds. You take out a note card and you look at this and you're like, all right, what's happening in this bar that made me want to cry? Okay, the violins are moving up. Interesting. Like, you just kind of observe what you can, and you don't worry about the notes. The important thing is that you don't try to play it, or you don't worry about the notes. You just worry about structurally what's happening. Okay, the melody, violin 1, violin 2. Interesting. Okay, the harp is decorating. And I don't know, I just remember when I was first opening big, like, conductor scores, it's really scary. It's like looks like there's so much happening. It's very scary to open up a score for the first time.
And you have like instruments transposing, not even the same key.
Exactly. It's like, for someone who's doing it for the first time, and it can be really daunting and intimidating, and really make you just like, oh, I'll just stick to beats, and not even like explore this other side of like what I could maybe make. But if you actually break it down, if you actually go into, like, separate it out into, okay, the brass and the low strings are doing the chords. That's one thing. And then the melody, the flute, the violins, the oboe, all of them are doing the exact same thing. Oh, weird. If you break it down like that and just use a pencil and stop being so precious with it, you're like, oh, like, this page that's full of instruments, top to bottom, 3 things are happening, actually. Like, there's only 3 things actually happening on the page. And what if I just do those 3 things and just try it out? And if you just do that enough for a long enough time, and if you have that on a note card, if you just structurally break it down, over time, you're going to have a box of note cards that's you. You know what I mean? A box of note cards that's a distillation of what resonates with you and what you like. And so if you're just working and you pick out a note card and you're like, all right, let me use this, then you're going to have your own sound. Like, you'll literally have a box of note cards that's what you sound like, in my opinion.
And it helps to develop your own voice too.
Yeah. So it was intimidating at first, but I would just spend a while, on my nights. I would just come back and just like rip apart scores and just like try to figure it out. And listen, I've got a ton to learn. But boy, I would be amazed at the stuff that I'm writing. Like 2 years ago.
Really? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And you know what I love about what you just said is that he said, find something that you resonate with.
Yeah.
Because there are so many things of like scores you need to study as a composer, and you know, Haydn and Beethoven, and I'm sure there's Shostakovich in there. There's all sorts of things. And I'm a complete classical nerd, so I eat that stuff up. I love it.
Absolutely.
But if you do that, then it seems like there's a huge barrier for a lot of people that don't have that kind of background. And I love the idea that he's saying you just need to find what resonates with you and study it and find out why it resonates with you.
Exactly. If you have no connection to the music, it's like, no, I 100%. And I think if you have the background, it's like, that's so incredible. Like, that's so amazing that you can be inside of this music and love it, and it means something to you.
But because you have a connection to it. But if there's no connection, that does you absolutely no good. Absolutely no good.
Yeah. If you're studying what you think you're supposed to be studying because you read it on a website of you were like on Watch Mojo, and it was like the top 10 like cool orchestral scores of like, and you're like, oh wow, I best, like, you're gonna open the score, you're gonna start at bar 1, and then by bar 3 you're going to be asleep.
It's true,
and you won't have learned anything. Truly.
Right. Exactly. And also, getting all of those orchestration books are really, really great. And there's just so much context in there, but you need to have some sort of connection with it, or else you'll fall asleep. You're like, okay, I love it that the oboe and the flute sound like that together, but I'm never going to use it because I don't know where anyone uses
because you have no context for it. And there's no reason for you to care about it, because it's just like something that it's just on a page in a book that you like. But let's say you like Star Wars, you can go and buy the Star Wars scores and freaking like just get something that you like, get it in front of you, get your hands on it, mark it up with a use a pencil because you want to be able to erase. But mark it up.
Or make a photocopy and then just...
Or make a photocopy, even better. Yeah. Because those books are expensive. That's true.
Yes, they are very expensive. I love it. And I know that you have made it kind of your own mission to break down other barriers for people of color. Do you want to explain a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, and I think a lot of it comes from being someone who didn't, like we were pretty broke growing up. Like we couldn't do lessons, and everything that I learned, it was like by myself, like in a room, like trying to like figure it out and just like go little by little, and yeah, I was never brave enough to ask for music lessons. And I think a lot of it just came from feeling out of place in those communities in school. Like, I mean, honestly, like my sister went to like a performing arts high school because she was a musical theater nerd, and she's a very talented comedy writer now who lives a couple miles from me in town. So she is doing great. But I remember she was like, "Oh, you should try out for the academy. Like, you play guitar." And I was kind of playing guitar. Like, I was like a little bit. I was like, I love Blink-182. So I was like a little bit playing guitar back then.
Yeah, you're saying I do these things a little bit, but I have a feeling you're a lot better than what you're saying. I'm just getting this, like, just a hint about
That's so funny. Yeah, but how dumb would it sound if I was like, yeah, and so I was kind of shredding when I was 8, and it was cool. I remember being like, I can't go to the school. Like, one, like, that's for like those are for the kids who have lessons and have the opportunity to do it, and I just didn't feel like it was for me.
Yeah.
And I think I really resonate with the idea that especially this job, I mean, the film industry overall, and I think it's getting so much better. And I think it's a lot easier to see yourself, I think, as, if you're like a young Puerto Rican kid from Hartford, and you're just in your like little room trying to figure out how to work a guitar amp. I think it's a lot easier these days to see yourself with a career, or see yourself, doing something. But I think like the opportunities in music are so much bigger than, like, I think there are so many more opportunities in music than just being, I'm an artist or I'm a producer. I think for film composition, for years, it was everybody looked more or less the same, and there was 5 of them, and
Right.
and those, and a lot of them really nice guys. But I think for me, when I'm looking for help, and it's especially happening right now, I really try to, like, I'm looking for an assistant right now. So if you know anybody,
Plug out there.
Oh no!
Send your demo reels. I'll have your email address.
Oh no! So anyway, so I'm looking for help right now, and I was trying to figure out a way to make it kind of democratic. Like, I didn't want to just go to USC, and I didn't go there, but I was trying to figure out how to make it. So anyway, so I put out like a kind of an open call a little bit onto like a trusted platform, and what I've done so far is that the plan is to just scrub all of, more or less, the school, their name, their, like, as much like background information as I can. I'm trying to scrub from the process and just try to focus on, and it's tougher when it's things like an assistant, you need some skills, but I'm trying to just focus on skills and a little prompt that I put in there. And I think, like, there are ways of making it blind, and I know that there are some film studios that do this. My friend Frank Garcia, who got me the job at Apple for the Jane Show, is a huge champion of people of just like taking away all the credits and the names and in the school you went to, and just focusing on your work. And which is how we met. He like did a panel on this, and I thought that was amazing, and I reached out. So I try to like, when I'm hiring, especially then, I'm trying to do things blind and be really fair about opportunities. And I don't know, man, I think it was tough for me to really feel like this was like a real career that like made sense for me as a human being. And I think the more that, I mean, as the years go by, I think people are, there's just like more and more, you know, brown people getting work, you know, which is like, I mean, I guess I should actually say it, but, and I think it's amazing, and I'm just trying to hire as fairly as I can, and I've, you know, listen, I've got bias, of course, that I'm trying to actively avoid. It's just hard when you're the only person in a room that kind of looks, and listen, like, look at me, I'm freaking, like, I'm pretty white passing, like, I'm not like, but even me, like, I don't know, I'm just trying to make people feel like they belong in a room, and that it's okay that they don't know how to read music because their parents couldn't afford to give them lessons, or like send them to like a fancy school that had the time to teach them, or maybe their music program in school wasn't that great. Again, all three mine. And yeah, it's like, as if you care about it a lot, if you if it matters to you, it doesn't really, like, then it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? Like, if it matters to you and you want to do this, then you're gonna be fine, but you gotta like just work a little bit. You gotta just sit for a while.
Well, you were able to get an assistant job without being able to really read music as well as you wanted.
That was a secret.
Oh, was it? Oh, see, that's what I was gonna ask. Like,
that was
how
a
did
secret.
That just didn't come up?
Well, I don't know. With an assistant, yeah, like, you should not hire an assistant based on their music.
Okay.
I don't. In fact, it's like, it's kind of a bad look when an assistant is like really. I mean, this is kind of like this. I mean, okay. You know what? And this is good to share.
Okay.
Like, if you're
always cut it.
if you're looking to be a composer's assistant, it's oftentimes, like, a lot of the time, if you want to be a composer's assistant, you want to be a composer most of the time. Right. So you want to be writing. You want to, you want opportunities. But when someone's hiring an assistant, they've got the writing taken care of. Like, they're good to go. They need someone to take care of the rest so that they can focus on writing. So when an assistant comes in and they're super, here's my music, like, here's how good I can write, instead of, I know logic, I'm polite, and like, I'm a human being and I can look you in the eye and not talk your ear off about pizzicato, like, before I, tell you where I'm from or ask you a question and how you are, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's so much more important to be a human being than to be able to write good music when you're looking when you're trying to be, when you're looking for an assistant.
Right.
So my music, like, never came up. I think like 2 years into me working for him, he was like, "Oh, what does your music sound like?" And I kind of like, this is so funny. I like, he was like, "Oh," I was like, "Oh, I should, like, I'm kind of interested to hear your stuff," because I think I was going for something and I needed like a recommendation from him. And I was like, "Okay." And I remember I was like, "Oh yeah, I'll send you something." And I went home and I like wrote. I went home and I went in my room and I like literally wrote a demo that I promise sounded like a nightmare. Like, it was truly, like, was not very good. And I remember, and I sent it to him, and the next day, he was like, "Oh, I listened to your thing. It was good."
With that tone of, you're like,
dude,
oh,
it was amazing. Like, I mean, back then I was like, "Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I worked really hard. Man, that's right. It was good." No, that poof. No, I don't think it was very good. Judging on like the stuff that I was writing 2 years after that, which was 2 years ago for me, I'm like, there's no way that was all that hot. But
yeah,
it's like, it's a process, and like, I don't know. It's hack, but the stuff you make when you're first starting out is not even close to like what you've got in you. You know what I mean? Most of the time.
That's to be expected.
Yeah.
Because as experience comes along, you get
normal,
better.
Normal. But it's hard not to compare. It's really hard to remember that.
Yeah. What advice do you have for aspiring composers?
Oh man. I mean, it's just gonna be in the same vein. Relax. It's like, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna have a great career. Just like, your music's good. If you care about it, it will come. If you're good, and obviously you need to get to a point, like, you need to get to a minimum, and that takes like a lot of effort. But I I've never in my life, in my entire like composing career, I've never gotten a job through a job application. Like everything came from being in the community, kind of like knowing people, putting myself out there, like going to events and things like that. And I think that information, like that kind of tidbit is a lot more publicly available for people now. Like I think people are hip to the idea that they should show up to like little networking events now. But I don't know, I think there's so much pressure in music in general and in this career, and it's a really scary career to pick. And a lot of folks, like myself included, you take on a lot of debt to do it. And I studied economics. Like I took on a lot of debt that will in no way be relevant to my career at all. But that being said, like it's stressful, but you have to live your life too. You know what I mean? And I think like most people hire based on, you know, like your music is one thing. Like everybody who's up for this job could probably do a good job, but it's who is easy to work with, who's kind of like relaxed, who makes you feel kind of secure, like that like, oh, okay, we're in good hands. And it's probably the guy who's just like watched a lot of movies, and it's just like it's probably just the person that can just hang and just like talk about life and relationships and not like, I promise you, like you're gonna be so much more successful if you talk about something that isn't music. You know what I mean? Like if you're in a job interview and music is the last thing you talk about, you've done it right. Like truly, it's just you gotta relax. You gotta watch movies. You gotta live life to inform your music and like the things that you want to make. And sure, you can obsess at being like the best piano player, but then like you're going to show up to an interview or you're going to meet somebody and all you're going to have to talk about is the ones and twos, you know what I mean? Like all you got is like the black and white keys, and you know, that's really useful. It's really useful to know your stuff, but usually people are like, oh man, like the Succession finale was so crazy. Like
you're like, I don't know,
I was think about that. And then you connect with people. You are practicing. It's true. Anyway, I don't know. I just think it's just be a human being and like listen and don't be so focused on how can this help me and how can this, you know, advance my career. You just got to live a little life, you know. And I think it makes you ironically I think it makes you a lot more competitive.
Being well-rounded.
You know?
Be a human being.
Be a human being. I'm very, very passionate about that.
True. Well, Kyle Rodriguez, you are amazing. It has been so fun to hear your stories and to chat with you and to learn about your process and see your instruments and your whole setup there. So thank you so much for being here. It's just been such a joy to have you here.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Thank you so much. It was amazing.